When I found that envelope hidden in my husband's desk drawer, it was as if time stopped, leaving me alone with words that would change everything. The truth dies with me. That message, written in Robert's own hand just days before his death, transformed me from a grieving widow into a detective of my own life. Good morning, my dears. I'm Dorothy Chen, 71 years old, and today I'm sharing a story I've kept private for 5 years, a tale of secrets, courage, and the unexpected strength we find when everything we believed turns out to be a carefully constructed lie. I'm so grateful you're here with me on the Golden Years Stories channel. If this resonates with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence here means the world to me. Today's special shout-out goes to Maria Santos from the Philippines. Thank you for being part of our community. It was March 2019 when Robert passed away suddenly at age 73. We'd been married for 42 years, built a life in Portland, Oregon, raised 2 wonderful daughters, and thought we knew everything about each other. Robert had been a city planner for the city of Portland, respected and admired throughout our community, always the first to volunteer for neighborhood improvement projects. He'd spent 30 years designing parks, planning traffic systems, and working to make our city more livable for everyone. Our friends called us the perfect couple, the Chens who never argued in public, who finished each other's sentences, who still held hands after 4 decades together. But perfection, I learned, is just another word for carefully hidden truths. Robert and I met in 1975 at a community meeting about zoning changes in the neighborhood where I was renting a small apartment. I was 27. Working as an elementary school teacher, passionate about education and children's welfare. He was 29, fresh out of graduate school with a degree in urban planning, presenting proposals with such enthusiasm that his glasses kept sliding down his nose. After the meeting, we ended up at the same coffee shop and he asked if he could join me. We talked for 3 hours straight, discussing everything from city development to our favorite books to our dreams for the future. Our courtship was sweet and simple. Weekend hikes in Forest Park, picnics by the Willamette River, long drives along the Oregon coast. Robert was kind, thoughtful, and steady, qualities I valued after growing up with an unpredictable father who moved our family every few years for work. When Robert proposed on New Year's Eve 1976, standing on the deck of a riverboat as fireworks lit up the Portland skyline, I said yes without hesitation. We married that spring in a small ceremony at the Japanese garden, surrounded by blooming cherry blossoms and 50 of our closest friends and family. Our daughters arrived within the first 5 years of marriage. Jennifer came first in 1978, a serious baby who grew into a thoughtful child and eventually became a pediatrician. Emily followed in 1980, our wild child, the artist who saw magic in everything and now runs a successful graphic design business in Seattle. Robert was a devoted father, coaching their soccer teams, attending every school play, teaching them to ride bikes in our quiet neighborhood streets. He read to them every night, Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden, all the classics, doing different voices for each character until they dissolved into giggles. We bought our home in 1982, a charming craftsman bungalow in the Laurelhurst neighborhood with a wide front porch and a backyard big enough for the girls to run wild. The house had good bones but needed work, and Robert and I spent years renovating it together. He taught me how to lay tile, and I taught him how to refinish furniture. That house became our sanctuary, filled with the sounds of our daughters' laughter, neighborhood barbecues, and holiday gatherings where Robert's famous apple pie was always the centerpiece. Money was tight in those early years. Robert's city salary was modest, and teachers didn't make much either. We clipped coupons, shopped at thrift stores, and took camping trips instead of expensive vacations. But we were happy, or at least I thought we were. Looking back now with the clarity that comes from devastating discovery, I can see small inconsistencies I explained away at the time. The occasional unexplained absence on Saturday afternoons. The separate checking account, he said, was for personal expenses that I never questioned. The twice-yearly trips to Seattle, he claimed, were for professional conferences, but never brought home materials from. I trusted him completely. After all, Robert was the most honest person I knew, the man who returned a $20 bill the cashier gave him by mistake, who insisted on paying back even the smallest debts, who taught our daughters that integrity was the foundation of character. How could someone so committed to truth be living the biggest lie imaginable? 3 weeks after his funeral, after the memorial service where 200 people shared stories of Robert's kindness, after the burial in the cemetery plot we'd purchased together years earlier, after the endless parade of casseroles and condolence cards, I finally gathered the courage to face his home office. The room where he'd spent countless evenings reviewing city plans, where he'd helped our daughters with homework, where he'd written Christmas cards and paid bills and lived what I thought was a transparent life. The estate attorney, Mr. Walsh, had given me a list of documents to gather: insurance policies, property deeds, retirement accounts, tax returns. It should have been straightforward. Robert had always been organized, filing everything in clearly labeled folders in his oak filing cabinet. But as I worked through the drawers, something felt off. There were gaps in the files, missing months in credit card statements, unexplained transfers in bank records that showed money leaving our joint account regularly for years. I was pulling out the bottom drawer of his desk, the one that always stuck and required a good tug, when I noticed something odd. The drawer wasn't fully extended, even though I'd pulled as hard as I could. I reached in, feeling along the back, and my fingers found a metal box pushed far into the space behind the drawer cavity. It took me 20 minutes to figure out how to remove the entire drawer from its track so I could reach the box. It was small, maybe 8 inches by 10 inches, made of dark steel with a combination lock on the front. My hands trembled as I turned it over, looking for any clue about what it contained. That's when I saw it, a small piece of tape on the underside of the drawer I'd just removed, and attached to it, a folded piece of paper with 3 numbers written in Robert's careful handwriting: 7/21/68, July 21st, 1968. The date we'd first met. No, wait, that wasn't right. We met in 1975. I stared at those numbers, my heart beginning to pound with a dread I couldn't name. With shaking fingers, I turned the combination lock. 7/21/68. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was an envelope with my name on it, Dorothy, written in Robert's distinctive script. Beneath the envelope were documents: birth certificates, photographs, bank statements, letters bound with rubber bands. But I couldn't look at those yet. My entire focus was on that envelope, sealed and waiting for me to break it open and let whatever secrets it contained spill into my carefully ordered world. I sat down in Robert's leather desk chair, the one that still smelled faintly of his cologne, and, with trembling hands, I tore open the envelope. "My dearest Dorothy," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone and you've found what I've hidden for so many years. I've written this letter dozens of times over the past 2 decades, always hoping I'd find the courage to tell you the truth while I was still alive, to give you the choice of whether to forgive me or leave me. But I was a coward, Dorothy. I loved you too much to risk losing you, and I justified my silence by telling myself I was protecting you, protecting our family, protecting the life we'd built together. The truth is, I have a daughter named Claire. She was born on July 21st, 1968, which makes her 35 years old if you're reading this after I'm gone. Her mother's name was Patricia Morrison, and she was my girlfriend during my senior year of college. We were young and careless, and when she told me she might be pregnant in the summer of 1968, I panicked. I was about to start graduate school on a scholarship I couldn't afford to lose. I told her I couldn't be involved, that she should handle it however she saw fit. I gave her $500, everything I had saved from my summer job, and I walked away. I convinced myself she'd probably had an abortion or given the baby up for adoption. I never called her again. I never looked back. Until 1980. That's when Patricia found me. Claire was 12 years old and Patricia was dying of cancer. She didn't want money or a relationship for herself. She just wanted Claire to know her father before it was too late, to have someone in the world who was hers by blood. She sent me photographs. Dorothy, When I saw Claire's face, I saw my own father looking back at me. The same nose, the same eyes, the distinctive widow's peak. There was no doubt she was mine. I met Patricia at a coffee shop in Seattle. She looked so frail, so sick, but she spoke with a fierce determination about Claire's future. She'd never married, had raised Claire alone while working as a nurse. She'd told Claire that her father had died before she was born rather than admit the truth, that I'd abandoned them both. Now, with only months to live, Patricia wanted to give Claire what she deserved, a father's support, if not his presence. I should have told you then, Dorothy. That was the moment of truth, the crossroads where an honest man would have confessed everything. But we'd just had Emily. Jennifer was only 2 years old. You were exhausted from caring for 2 babies, still adjusting to motherhood, and I was terrified. Terrified you'd leave me. Terrified our daughters would grow up in a broken home. Terrified of losing the beautiful life we'd just begun to build. So I made a deal with Patricia. I would support Claire financially, ensure she had everything she needed, education, medical care, opportunities. But I would remain anonymous. Patricia agreed, understanding that my appearance in Claire's life would only raise questions she couldn't answer from beyond the grave. She promised Claire would believe the money came from her father's life insurance policy, from savings Patricia had set aside. Patricia died 4 months later. I sent flowers to the funeral anonymously, and I began sending money every month, $500 at first, more as my salary increased over the years. I opened a separate bank account, the one you knew about but never questioned, and funneled money there from my paycheck before it reached our joint account. For holidays and birthdays, I sent larger amounts. When Claire needed braces, I paid for them. When she went to college, I covered her tuition at Portland State University. When she bought her first car, got married, had her own children, I was there financially, if not physically. Over the years, I watched her from a distance. She lived only 15 miles away, Dorothy. 15 miles. I attended her college graduation, sitting in the back row where she'd never notice me. I drove past her apartment when she was in her 20s, past the house she bought when she got married. I saw my grandchildren, our grandchildren, playing in their yard. And I couldn't approach them, couldn't claim them, because of the lie I'd built brick by brick over decades. The guilt has eaten at me every day for 25 years. Every time you talked about honesty with our daughters, every time you said you were grateful for our transparent marriage, every time you told me I was a good man, each word was a knife twisting deeper. I wanted to tell you so many times. On our 20th anniversary, when Jennifer got married, when Emily had her first art show and you said you were so proud of our family, each time I opened my mouth to confess, and fear choked the words before they could escape. I know what I've done is unforgivable. I've stolen your right to know the complete truth about the man you married. I've diverted money that should have been used for our family, for our daughters' educations, for our retirement. I've lived a double life, keeping a secret child hidden like she was something shameful when in fact, she's an innocent victim of my cowardice. In this box, you'll find everything you need to contact Claire if you choose to do so. Her current address, phone number, email. Photographs of her through the years. I hired a private investigator years ago to take them. Another secret expense. Bank statements showing every dollar I sent her. Letters she wrote to Mr. Henderson, the fake name I used, thanking her mysterious benefactor for his generosity, asking questions about who I was and why I cared. Dorothy, I'm asking you to do what I couldn't. Be brave. If you can find it in your heart to reach out to Claire, to tell her the truth about her father, please do. She deserves to know she wasn't abandoned, that I thought about her every single day, that my failure to claim her publicly was about my weakness, not her worth. I understand if you hate me. I hate myself. I understand if you want to tell our daughters what a fraud their father was. They should know. I understand if you destroy these documents and pretend you never found them. If you protect my memory by keeping my secrets buried with me. But if there's any chance you can find compassion for a flawed, foolish man who loved you desperately and failed you completely, please consider giving Claire what she's never had, a family. She has two half-sisters who don't know she exists. She has nieces and nephews who are her blood relations. She has you. And Dorothy, despite everything, I believe you would love her if you gave yourself the chance. The truth dies with me unless you choose to resurrect it. The choice is yours, as it should have been all along. I'm so sorry, my love. For everything. Forever yours, Robert. I don't know how long I sat there, tears streaming down my face, reading and rereading those pages. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 4 times before I finally looked up, my eyes swollen, my hands cramping from gripping the letter so tightly. The man I'd mourned for 3 weeks wasn't the man I'd thought I knew. 42 years of marriage, and I'd been living with a stranger. Every anniversary, every family dinner, every intimate moment, all of it shadowed by this massive secret. But as the initial shock began to fade, replaced by a numbness that felt almost like calm, other emotions started to surface. Anger, yes. Betrayal, absolutely. But also something unexpected. A strange kind of sympathy for the young, scared 21-year-old Robert, who'd made a terrible choice, and then spent the rest of his life too afraid to unmake it. And beneath all of that, a growing curiosity about Claire. This woman who was Robert's daughter, my husband's child, my daughter's half-sister. This person who'd existed in the shadows of our lives for 35 years. Unknown and unknowable. With trembling hands, I reached back into the metal box. The photographs were organized chronologically, each in its own labeled envelope. Claire, age 12, read the first one. I pulled out a school photo of a serious-looking girl with dark hair cut in a bob, wearing a blue sweater. She had Robert's eyes, that distinctive gray-green color that looked different in every light. His nose. His serious expression that would break into a sudden transforming smile. I went through them one by one, watching Claire grow up in frozen moments. Age 14 at what looked like a birthday party. Age 16 in a cap and gown at her high school graduation. Age 19 in casual clothes on the Portland State campus. Age 23 in a wedding dress, standing next to a tall man with kind eyes. Age 27 holding a newborn baby, her face radiant with new motherhood. Age 30 with 2 children now, a girl about 3 and a baby boy. Age 33 at what looked like a graduation ceremony, probably getting an advanced degree. Each photograph felt like a punch to the chest. This was Robert's daughter. These were his grandchildren, and none of us had known they existed. I found a resume in the box. Apparently Robert had obtained it somehow, another piece of his secret surveillance. Claire Morrison Hughes, she'd hyphenated her name when she married, was a social worker specializing in foster care and adoption services. She had a master's degree in social work from Portland State. She volunteered with several children's advocacy organizations. Her LinkedIn profile, printed out and included in the box, showed someone dedicated to helping vulnerable children find permanent families. The irony was devastating. While Claire devoted her career to reuniting families and finding homes for abandoned children, she'd grown up believing her own father had died before she was born, never knowing he was alive and watching from the shadows. The letters were hardest to read. Dozens of them written over 20 years addressed to Mr. Henderson, care of a P.O. box Robert had maintained. In her early letters, teenage Claire thanked her mysterious benefactor for his generosity, speculating about who he might be. A friend of her mother's? A distant relative? Some kind of charitable foundation? Dear Mr. Henderson, one letter from when she was 16 read, "Thank you so much for the graduation gift. $1,000 is so generous, and it will really help with my college expenses. I wish I knew who you were so I could thank you properly. My mom never told me much about you before she died, just that you were someone who cared about my future. Sometimes I pretend you're my fairy godfather, watching over me from afar." Is that silly? Anyway, I got accepted to Portland State University with a partial scholarship, and your gifts over the years have made it possible for me to attend without drowning in debt. I'm going to major in social work because I want to help kids like me who grow up without everything they need. Thank you for helping me. Love, Claire. Another letter from her mid-20s. Dear Mr. Henderson, I wanted to let you know I got married last month to a wonderful man named David Hughes. He's a teacher, and we're so happy together. I also wanted to tell you that I've been searching for information about my biological father. My mom told me he died before I was born, but I found my birth certificate, and there's no father listed. I've started to wonder if maybe she told me that story to protect me from a harder truth, that he didn't want me, that he abandoned us. If you knew my father, if that's why you've been helping me all these years, I want you to know that I'm not angry. People make mistakes, especially when they're young. I just wish I could know the truth, to understand where I come from. But regardless, thank you for being the father figure I never had, even if I've never met you. Claire. I sat on the floor of Robert's office, surrounded by the evidence of his secret life, crying for Claire. For the little girl who'd lost her mother at 12. For the teenager who'd invented a fairy godfather to explain the mysterious help she received. For the young woman who'd pieced together that her father hadn't died but had chosen to stay away. For the social worker who spent her life repairing families while her own family tree had a gaping hole where Robert should have been. And I cried for Robert too, despite my anger. For the prison he'd built for himself, watching his daughter from behind a wall of lies, unable to claim her or let her go. For the guilt that must have consumed him every time Jennifer and Emily called him Daddy, while Claire grew up calling no one by that name. For the grandchildren he'd seen only in stolen photographs instead of holding in his arms, but mostly I cried for myself. For the marriage I'd thought was honest and transparent. For the man I'd believed I knew completely. For the life that had just shattered into before and after, with that letter as the dividing line. I spent 3 days in that office, going through every piece of paper, every photograph, every bank statement. I called in sick to the part-time library job I'd taken after retiring from teaching, unable to face the world while my own world was imploding. I ignored calls from Jennifer and Emily, sending brief texts that I was fine, just needed some alone time to process grief. The financial betrayal was significant. Robert had sent Claire over $300,000 over the years. Money that came from the salary increases he'd never told me about. The bonuses I didn't know he received, the small inheritance from his father that he'd claimed went to paying off the mortgage. We could have retired earlier. Jennifer's student loans could have been smaller. Emily's struggling art business could have had seed money. All those times we'd scrimped and saved, and Robert was sending hundreds of dollars a month to his secret daughter. I knew I should be furious. By all rights, I should hate him. But the emotion that kept surfacing, surprising me with its intensity, wasn't hatred. It was profound sadness. Sadness for all the years Robert had carried this burden alone. Sadness for Claire, who'd deserved a father. Sadness for the twisted logic that had convinced Robert that lying was somehow protecting us. And beneath the sadness, something else was growing. Curiosity. I kept coming back to Claire's photographs, studying her face, looking for traces of Jennifer and Emily in her features. The three of them shared Robert's serious expression, his straight nose, his way of tilting his head slightly in photographs. But Claire had something else too, a guardedness in her eyes that my daughters had never needed. A wariness that came from growing up knowing on some level that you'd been unwanted. On the 4th day, I called my best friend Susan, who'd known me since college, who'd been at my wedding, who'd helped me through every crisis of the past 40 years. I need to tell you something, I said when she arrived at my house with Chinese takeout and wine, her standard crisis response kit, and you're not going to believe it. I told her everything, watching her face cycle through shock, anger, disbelief, and finally, a careful neutrality. Okay, she said when I finished. So what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to contact Claire immediately, to apologize for Robert's choices, to invite her into our family. But another part of me thinks I should protect Jennifer and Emily from this, keep Robert's secret buried the way he wanted. What does your gut tell you? Susan asked. I closed my eyes, trying to access whatever inner wisdom people were supposed to have in situations like this. My gut says Claire has a right to know, that Jennifer and Emily have a right to know, that secrets like this only grow more poisonous the longer you keep them. Then there's your answer, Susan said simply. But it wasn't that simple, because telling the truth meant destroying my daughter's memories of their father. It meant admitting that our perfect marriage had been built on lies. It meant potentially bringing a stranger into our family who might resent us, might blame us, might want nothing to do with the women who'd lived the life she was denied. I spent another week wrestling with the decision, reading Claire's letters over and over, studying her photographs, imagining the conversation that would change everything. Finally, I made up my mind. I would contact Claire first, alone, before telling Jennifer and Emily. I owed her that, a chance to react privately, to process her feelings without the pressure of meeting her half-sisters immediately. Then, if Claire was willing, we would figure out together how to tell Jennifer and Emily that their family was bigger than they'd known. I drafted and deleted dozens of emails before finally settling on something simple and honest. Dear Claire, my name is Dorothy Chen. I was married to your biological father, Robert Chen, for 42 years before he passed away in March. I know this email must come as a tremendous shock. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you this in person, but I didn't know if you'd be willing to meet me before knowing who I was and why I was reaching out. Your father died of a heart attack 3 weeks ago. While going through his papers, I discovered a letter he'd written to me explaining that you exist, that he'd been supporting you financially for years, and that he deeply regretted never having the courage to claim you publicly as his daughter. I want you to know that I knew nothing about you until I found that letter. Robert kept your existence secret from me, from his other daughters, your half-sisters, from everyone in his life. I'm not writing to make excuses for him. What he did was wrong on so many levels. But I'm writing because you deserve to know the truth about your father, and because I believe you deserve the chance to know your half-sisters if you want that. I have many photographs of you that Robert kept, letters you wrote to him over the years, documentation of his financial support. I also have 2 daughters, Jennifer, 41, and Emily, 39, who don't yet know about you. I wanted to reach out to you first, to give you time to process this information and decide what, if anything, you want to do with it. If you're willing to meet, I would very much like to talk with you in person. If not, I understand completely. This is an overwhelming situation, and you owe me nothing. Not forgiveness, not understanding, not a relationship. Whatever you decide, please know that you are not unloved. Robert thought about you every day. His secrecy was about his own fear and weakness, not about your worth. You deserved better than the father you got, but you were always his daughter. Even if he lacked the courage to say it out loud. Sincerely, Dorothy Chen. I hit send before I could second-guess myself again, then sat staring at my computer screen, my heart pounding. It was 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. Would Claire even check her email today? Would she think it was a scam? Would she delete it without reading, or forward it to the police thinking I was some kind of con artist? The reply came 14 hours later, at 5 a.m. the next morning. I was awake, I'd barely slept, and I saw the notification flash on my phone screen. Mrs. Chen, I've read your email 15 times trying to decide if it's real. Part of me thinks this must be a mistake or some elaborate fraud. But another part of me, the part that's been searching for answers my whole life, believes you. I don't know what to feel. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm confused. I'm relieved. All of those things at once, which doesn't make sense, but that's where I am. My mother told me my father died before I was born. When I was old enough to start asking questions, I found my birth certificate with no father listed and realized she'd lied to me. I've spent years wondering whether he abandoned us, whether he even knew I existed, whether he would have wanted to know me if he'd had the chance. To find out he did know, that he was alive my entire life, that he was watching me from a distance but never stepped forward. I don't have words for how that feels. But I also need to know more. I need to understand why. I need to see those photographs and letters. I need to know about these half-sisters I apparently have. I need to piece together the truth about where I came from. Yes, I'll meet you. When and where? Claire. We met 3 days later at a quiet tea shop in Southeast Portland, neutral territory where neither of us had history. I arrived 15 minutes early, my hands shaking as I ordered chamomile tea I knew I wouldn't be able to drink. I'd brought a folder with some of the photographs and letters, unsure how much to share in a first meeting. When Claire walked through the door at exactly 2 p.m., I recognized her immediately, despite being 35 years older than her most recent photograph. She had Robert's walk, that slightly purposeful stride, his way of scanning a room before fully entering. She saw me. I'd told her I'd be wearing a red scarf, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other across the tea shop. Then she walked over, and we sat down across from each other, two women connected by a dead man's secrets, trying to figure out how to begin. "You look like him," I said finally, because it was true, and because I didn't know how else to start. The eyes especially. "That's how I knew it was you when you came in." "He looked like me, you mean," Claire said, a hint of sharpness in her voice. "Since I existed first." "You're right," I said. "I'm sorry. I'm not sure what the protocol is for this kind of conversation." "I don't think there is one," Claire said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "I've been a social worker for 15 years, helped families through every kind of complicated situation imaginable, and I have no idea how to handle this." I slid the folder across the table. "These are some of the photographs Robert kept, and a few of your letters. I brought copies. I have all the originals at home if you want them." Claire opened the folder with trembling hands. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at her own face aging through the photographs. "He watched me grow up," she whispered. "He was there watching and I never knew." "I'm so sorry," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "You deserved so much better." We sat in that tea shop for 4 hours, talking through the entire painful story. I told her about Robert, about our marriage, about Jennifer and Emily. She told me about her mother, Patricia, about growing up with Mr. Henderson as her fairy godfather, about the moment she realized her father must have abandoned them. We cried together. We got angry together. And slowly, carefully, we began to build something fragile between us. Not quite friendship, not quite family, but perhaps the foundation for both. "I want to meet them," Claire said finally, as the tea shop was preparing to close. "Jennifer and Emily. I want to meet my sisters." "They don't know about you yet," I admitted. "I wanted to talk to you first, to make sure you were open to it before I devastated them with the truth about their father." Claire nodded slowly. "That makes sense. But Dorothy, can I call you Dorothy?" "Of course. When you tell them, make sure they understand something. I'm not angry at them. This wasn't their fault. They were children, just like I was. We're all just collateral damage from our father's choices." Our father. Hearing her claim Robert as her father, acknowledging the biological connection even while grappling with his betrayal, made me believe that maybe, somehow, this disaster could transform into something better. "I'll tell them this week," I promised. "And if they're willing, and I think they will be, maybe we can all meet soon. Together." Telling the truth, I invited Jennifer and Emily over for dinner that Saturday. Claiming I had something important to discuss, they arrived within minutes of each other, Jennifer punctual as always, Emily trailing in with paint still under her fingernails from her studio. "What's wrong, Mom?" Jennifer asked immediately, her doctor's instincts kicking in. "Are you sick? Is it about Dad?" "It's about your father," I confirmed, gesturing for them to sit at the dining room table. "But I'm not sick. At least not physically." I'd prepared a whole speech, carefully planned out how to break the news gently. But when I looked at my daughter's worried faces, I couldn't do it delicately. Some truths are too big for cushioning. "Your father had another daughter," I said. "She's 35 years old. Her name is Claire. He supported her financially for decades, but kept her existence secret from all of us. I found out after he died. The silence that followed was absolute." Jennifer's face went pale. Emily's mouth opened and closed without sound. They looked at each other, then back at me, then at each other again, as if checking whether they'd both heard the same impossible thing. "That's not possible," Jennifer said finally, her voice shaking. "Dad wouldn't. He couldn't." "I have proof," I said gently, pulling out copies of the letter, the photographs, The bank statements. I've already met her. She wants to meet both of you, if you're willing. What followed was 3 hours of shock, tears, anger, and eventually a kind of numb acceptance. Jennifer went through the documents like she was reviewing a patient's medical history, needing facts and evidence to believe something so contrary to everything she knew. Emily looked at Claire's photographs for a long time, tracing the familiar features in an unfamiliar face. "We have a sister," Emily finally said, looking up at me with tears streaming down her face. "How is that even possible? How did we live our whole lives not knowing we had a sister?" "Because your father was a coward," I said, and there was no gentleness in my voice now. "Because he made a terrible choice when he was young, and then spent 40 years being too afraid to fix it." "I don't know how to feel," Jennifer admitted. "I'm furious at Dad, but I also feel awful for this woman, for Claire, who grew up without a father because of his choices. And I feel guilty, like we got the family life she should have had too." "None of this is your fault," I said firmly, echoing Claire's words. "You were children. You didn't make these choices." "When can we meet her?" Emily asked quietly. The meeting, we met 2 weeks later at my house, the same house where Robert had lived with his secret for so many years. Claire arrived first, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. Jennifer and Emily showed up together. Having driven over from Jennifer's house, where they'd apparently spent the morning psyching themselves up for this meeting, the moment they saw each other, all three women froze. The family resemblance was unmistakable. They shared Robert's coloring, his build, his serious expression that could break into a sudden smile. But more than that, there was something in the way they moved, the way they held themselves, that marked them as sisters even before they'd exchanged a single word. "Hi," Claire said finally, her voice uncertain. "I'm Claire." "Jennifer," my oldest daughter said, extending her hand and then reconsidering and pulling Claire into an awkward hug. "This is so weird. You have Dad's nose." "So do you," Claire said, starting to cry and laugh at the same time. "Both of you. We all have his terrible nose." Emily joined the hug, and suddenly all three of them were crying and laughing together. Three sisters meeting for the first time in their 30s, united by grief and betrayal, and the strange bond of shared DNA. I watched from the kitchen doorway, my own tears flowing freely. This wasn't the family Robert had intended to create, but it was the family his death had made possible. We spent hours talking that day and many days after. Claire told her sisters about growing up with a single mother, about her career in social work, about her own children, Marcus, age 8, and Lily, age 5, who suddenly had aunts and a grandmother they hadn't known existed. Jennifer and Emily shared stories about